broadcast to be the backlash of somebody's lack of love. Or you can start speaking up. Nothing's gonna hurt you.
Don't call me before 9 o'clock. You can call me until midnight.
Oh, I get up early.
Night owl.
Night owl.
Early bird.
However, in my book, Sex Over 50, I tell couples to engage in sexual activity in the mornings.
The words fall out. Honestly,
I mean, I've been too direct for 75 years, so so many things have gotten me into trouble.
Diplomatic.
I'm diplomatically direct.
But I have learned to go to the mirror and talk to myself about being too direct, and then I can come back and approach it from a different point of view.
Oh, well, I mean, who wouldn't rather outsource that? So that doesn't mean I can't.
No, but can you do it?
I can. So domestically skilled.
I'm actually domestically skilled. That doesn't mean I do it that much, but I'm actually a pretty good cook.
Challenged.
Challenged. Oh, skilled, of course.
I'm an expert at stain removal.
All types, grease, blood.
Oh, blood and really good with dog shit.
stop holding your tongue. Maybe there's a way.
10 minutes late, 20 minutes late.
Actually, on time. I am the absolutely most prompt person in New York. Not that it's a rough field.
60 minutes late.
Say what you wanna say and let the words fall out. Honestly, I wanna see you be brave. Just wanna see you. Just wanna see you. Just wanna see you.
You better think about what you're trying to do to me. Think, let your mind go, let yourself be free.
Marching on Fifth Avenue for ourselves had a great feeling of exhilaration and freedom and contagiousness.
It was like a tsunami.
What unites women is the refusal to be manipulated any longer.
In 1971, I was hired at CBS News, the network. Everybody was a male. I mean, everybody. The staff, the producers, the executive producers, the bureau chief, men. I remember walking on the construction site the first day and people looking at me like, is she the daughter, the girlfriend, the mistress?
Welcome to People Are Talking.
He's getting paid a lot more money than I'm getting paid, and we're doing the same job. You know what my boss said? Why should you make that much money? In 1980, he said, why should you make that much money?
You see an 11-pound baby coming out of there, you don't want to go back in there.
Stand-up is pure power in a way that nothing else is. You're up there by yourself. You got that mic. That's your phallic symbol, for God's sake.
I decided to get the first ever televised public pap smear.
Here comes the speculum.
And Yves Saint Laurent high heels and a bikini and a lot of spray tan.
Seriously?
People always say to me, like, how do you deal with the challenges of being a woman in this industry? I don't really have time to worry about that somebody else has a problem with the fact that I have a vagina.
Although we weren't able to shatter that highest, hardest glass ceiling this time, thanks to you, it's got about 18 million cracks in it.
The government was shut down, and it was the women of the Senate who said, we're going to reach out and do something about that.
Someone needed to step forward and offer a way out of the impasse that we were in. Women led the way.
Quite frankly, many of us were pretty sure NASA wasn't serious about taking women. And they said maybe they can't fly in space because they can't wear that equipment.
How do we provide accommodations for the female? How do we provide a suit? A lot of us scratch our heads, well, how do they go to the bathroom?
You could see the blue sky turning into black, and you see that curve of the Earth. I was part of something so much bigger than I was.
The shuttle's launching, and it shakes and it rattles until the solid rocket boosters come out. I remember having this huge grin on my face because I was doing exactly what I wanted to do.
When you hear so many people around you telling your story, you then come to understand that it's not really your story. It's a lot of people's story.
So whoa, okay, we're back. I have been obsessed with Makers, this video initiative that you just saw, since high school when they started. Staying up till the wee hours of the night, obsessing over videos produced by these cool women who I never dreamed of meeting. And we have one of them with us here today. I would now like to welcome to the stage a maker of her own right, Caroline Waterlow. So Caroline is an Emmy Award-winning producer, has been working in documentary and television production for 17 years. She's the senior producer of content for the award-winning project Makers.com, what you just saw on the screen, a dynamic digital platform co-produced with PBS and AOL. The project produces short films about the lives of groundbreaking women who have shaped feminism and the women's movement, past and future. Recent interviews for Makers include former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords, senior presidential advisor Valerie Jarrett, U.S. versus Windsor attorney Roberta Kaplan, tennis champion Martina Navratilova, television journalist Connie Chung, and the Innocence Project lawyer Betty Ann Waters. In addition to Makers, Caroline is a producer of independent feature documentaries. Most recently, she was a co-producer of the 2014 Academy Award-nominated documentary Cutie and the Boxer, a Variety film about the life and marriage of artists Ushio and Noriko Shinohara. Cutie and the Boxer premiered at the 2013 Sundance Film Festival and won the award for Best Director of a U.S. documentary for Zachary Heisinger and secured international theatrical distribution with TWC Radius. And now, with the biggest fangirl pride, I introduce you to Caroline Waterlow.
Thank you. That's so sweet. Thanks. Thank you. It's a huge honor to be here today to represent the Makers Project and be amongst all these incredible people, the students most of all. I want to thank Georgetown Women in Leadership for hosting this important summit and for having Makers be a part of it. And I want to applaud Helen and Kendall, who I met just earlier this year and was hugely impressed by both of them. They came up to, I was at Georgetown attending an event with the Makers executive producer and founder, a woman named Dylan McGee, and we were in the crowd, and they beelined towards us and jumped on us, and so they were totally obsessed with Makers, and were just incredibly enthusiastic and wonderful, and they also said that the summit here today was partially inspired by watching Makers and by seeing these incredible stories about groundbreaking women, and I have to say, for us working on it, that is like your dream come true, because that is the exact goal of something like Makers. We're trying to, shine a light on these missing stories from our history, because women have always been making these contributions. We just, as Megan Smith likes to say, sometimes they get written out of the story. So we like to shine that light, and we want it to inspire all of you to go out into the world and make change. And as much as we love the raw data that we are able to gather from our website, Makers.com, we have 1.5 million viewers a month, unique viewers a month. That's new lingo I'm learning in this online world, unique viewers. And the demographics of our users happily are 48% male. But you know, all the tweets and Facebook likes and all the data in the world just doesn't replace how it feels when you see young women like these people here today, enthusiastic and empowered. So I applaud all of you here for putting this on. Just to give you a little background, I mean, you saw the trailer for our new documentaries. The origin of the project was my boss, Dylan McGee, the founder and executive producer, wanted to tell a film about, well, she wanted to make a film about Gloria Steinem and her leadership of the women's movement. And so she went to Gloria and said, you know, let's do this. And Gloria said, no. And Gloria said, if you're going to tell the story of the women's movement, it has to be hundreds of stories. It cannot be one leader or 10 leaders. It's hundreds of people from all walks of life. So Dylan took note of that and figured out a way to tell hundreds of stories. And that took its form, her vision took its form in the original, there was a 3-part documentary, Makers, Women Who Make America, that aired on PBS in 2013, which you saw a little mention of. And then we created this digital platform, and that's now been in existence for 2 years with our incredible partners AOL. And we put makers' profiles up on the site every week. Little short films about some amazing woman and the work that she has done. We now have over 220 videos on the site, so please rush out and look at them all and feel inspired by them. We add to it every week, and we have actually our first global maker coming up at the end of April. At this point, we estimate that there have been 65 million views on the site. So if you hope that there's change coming out of all of those things, then that's a great sign. I thought maybe this crowd would like to know that I became a producer on Makers because I was Dylan's intern 18 years ago, right out of college in 1996. And she was a great mentor to me, and then she became a sponsor, which is the word we've heard a lot today. She's hired me on projects, recommended me to other people, helped me have an amazing career. And so proof to all of you that these internships do help you and do matter. And my advice to all of you is to stay in touch with everybody you ever work with, make a huge impression on them for the good, and and just stay in touch. Which when I had to do it, it was a lot harder. So now you have all these tools to stay in touch, so make sure you do it. We're gonna show one more video after I speak, and one of the questions that we ask everybody, I mean, my job is that I get to go around and interview all these incredible women, so I get to sit and chat with them and then make a little film about them. And one of the questions, we have a list that we ask everybody so that we can start sort of aggregating some data and some information to see where some people have similar experiences or not similar experiences. And one question we ask everyone is, are you a feminist, or do you call yourself a feminist, and what does that word mean to you? And I don't think at the beginning of this, anybody had any notion that that was going to be such a charged question. But it has become this really interesting moment in every interview when I ask it, and I never quite know what I'm going to get back, and it's kind of fascinating. So clearly the word feminism is a charged word, and it means different things to different people, as I have learned. And it comes with certain connotations, certain media imagery that people have in their minds, something they learned in a class, or whatever it is, if you're different ages, have different perception of it. But now we tend to hear a lot more about gender equality, gender parity, leaning in. Frankly, whatever word you want to use, it's always about equality. And that is what feminism means. So you've already seen the trailer. We have these 6 new documentaries coming up in September about all women in all these different areas. Women in war, women in politics, women in business, women in Hollywood, women in comedy, and women in space, which is a good lead into who we're going to see very soon. I will leave you with a feminism video to watch. And I also thought I'd leave you with the words of Kara Swisher from her Makers video. She is a maker. At the beginning of her video, she says, "You either accept the future and where it's going, or you resist it and stay behind." So we at Makers hope all of you seize your futures and go into it with great empowerment, and we wish you the best of luck and can't wait to see what you do.
The definition of feminism is people who believe in the social, political, and economic equality of men and women. How can you not be a feminist?
I'm definitely a feminist.
A feminist, of course. How can I not be?
I am a feminist.
What is a feminist?
Too many people don't understand what feminism is. What it is democracy and justice. And if you leave the girls out, it ain't a democracy.
I never did consider or call myself a feminist, but I don't think you can really be a woman in this world and not be.
I don't like the word feminism because I feel like it's kind of anachronistic.
There's nothing wrong with being called a feminist, except that to me it always seemed something that I was not committed enough to be.
Yeah, there's this idea like feminism is humorless and humorless in a way that's like a whistleblower. Like you're gonna make sure that nobody has any fun.
The anti-war movement was humorless, and the civil rights movement was humorless, and nobody accused them of being humorless. But the women's movement comes along and everyone says, why don't they have a sense of humor?
For people to roll their eyes at the concept of being a feminist or that there's anything to fight for, or they're not living conscious lives. Goodbye.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Helen Brosnan, Milan Vivir, Neera Tanden, Ann Wall, and Judy Smith.
Thanks, everyone. I'm really excited for this panel in particular. If anyone knows anything about me, or you follow me on Twitter, or you just hear me in conversation, you know that I am the largest policy nerd alive. It is my life. It's what I breathe. So it is really an honor just to even be like in the presence of these women. And I was reflecting. I was looking at their bios and talking to some of them before, and all I can think about is when I look at areas of government and law and policy. And think tanks and all of these sorts of areas that all have unequal female representation, I always think to myself, like, how do we survive in this world without at least 50% of the women running this country? It doesn't make any sense to me. And then you meet these women and you're like, they are twice as great as some of the other male leaders out there. So that's why we are standing here and thriving. So thank you. So without further ado, I will introduce our moderator, Ambassador Milan Verveer. Ambassador Milan Verveer most recently served as the first U.S. ambassador for global women's issues, a position to which she was nominated by President Obama in 2009. She coordinated foreign policy issues and activities relating to the political, economic, and social advancement of women, traveling to nearly 60 countries. She worked to ensure that women's participation and rights are fully integrated into U.S. foreign policy, and she played a leadership role in the administration's development of the U.S. National Action Plan on Women, Peace, and Security. I just did a thesis paper on that, and it was incredible. President Obama also appointed her to serve as the U.S. representative to the UN Commission on the Status of Women. From 2000 to 2008, she was the chair and co-CEO of Vital Voices Global Partnership, an international NGO that she co-founded to invest in emerging women leaders. During the Clinton administration, she served as an assistant to the President and Chief of Staff to the First Lady. She also led the effort to establish the President's Interagency Council on Women and was instrumental in the adoption of Trafficking Victims Protection Act of 2000. Ambassador Verveer has a BS and MS from Georgetown University, double Hoya, amazing. Yes. There's no bias for you guys, it's just a source of pride. In 2013, she was the Humanitas visiting professor at Cambridge University. She is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations and the World Bank Advisory Council on Gender and Development. She holds several honorary degrees and is a recipient of numerous awards, including the U.S. Secretary of State's Award for Distinguished Service. You are amazing. And next we have Judy Smith. Judy Smith is also equally amazing. She's the founder and president of Smith & Company, a leading strategic and crisis communications firm with offices in both DC and LA. Perhaps best known in media circles for her expertise as a crisis management advisor, Mrs. Smith has served as a consultant for a host of high-profile celebrity and entertainment clients over the course of her career, including Monica Lewinsky, NFL quarterback Michael Vick, and the family of Chandra Levy. Prior to founding Smith & Company, Ms. Smith was a partner at several Washington, D.C.-based public relations firms. Before that, Ms. Smith served as senior vice president of corporate communications at NBC, where she reported directly to the president and CEO. Additionally, she served as NBC's chief spokesperson for domestic and international programming and business ventures, and also helped with the groundbreaking launch of one of the nation's first cable news stations, MSNBC. In 1991, Ms. Smith joined the White House with her appointment as Special Assistant and Deputy Press Secretary to President George H.W. Bush. Prior to joining the White House, Ms. Smith served as an Assistant United States Attorney and was a Special Counsel to the U.S. Attorney of the District of Columbia. Ms. Smith served as an Associate Counsel and Deputy Director of Public Information in the Office of the Independent Counsel from 1987 to 1989. Prior to her legal career, Ms. Smith worked as a writer and public affairs specialist for several publications and private organizations. She received a Bachelor of Science degree in Public Relations from Boston University and graduated from the American University Washington College of Law. The television show Scandal, I'm sure all of you have heard of this, is based off of Ms. Smith, sitting right here. Yeah, you can clap for that. That's really, really cool. If there's one thing that unites all of the males and female undergrads and parents, maybe even at this point, everyone wants to have their own TV show based off of them, so that's really cool. She serves as co-executive producer of the project. Ms. Smith is the author of a forthcoming book, Good Self, Bad Self on Crisis Management. And next we have Ann Wall. Ann Wall is incredible. She is the Deputy Assistant to the President for Legislative Affairs and Senate Liaison and has been a member of the White House Legislative Affairs team since 2011. Prior to joining the White House, Ann worked for the Senate Majority Whip Dick Durbin as a member of his leadership staff from 2006 to 2011. Ann joined Senator Durbin's office following several years as a practicing attorney and as a law clerk in Chicago. Very impressive. Neera Tanden, and can I just pause and tell one quick story about Neera Tanden? That's a personal story.
Only if it's good.
It's great. When I was in high school, I went through this reawakening where I realized that I cared about women's leadership and empowering women, and I sat down and I made a list of women I need to be more like, and Neera Tanden was number 2 on that list. Hillary Clinton was the only person that beat you out, I'm sorry, but you were number 2.
That's totally fine.
Okay, good. I feel like that's acceptable. And now the rest of you have absolutely made it onto that list. It is now hundreds and hundreds of people long, but you are all included on it at this point, so thank you. Neera Tanden is the president of the Center for American Progress and counselor to the Center for American Progress Action Fund. Most recently, Tanden served as the chief operating officer for the center, overseeing strategic planning, operations, and fundraising. Tanden previously served as a senior advisor for health reform at the Department of Health and Human Services, advising Secretary Sebelius and working on President Barack Obama's health reform team in the White House. That is really difficult. Prior to that, Tanden was the director of domestic policy for the Obama-Biden presidential campaign. Tanden also served as policy director for the Hillary Clinton presidential campaign. There we go. Before the presidential campaign, Tanden was the senior vice president for academic affairs at CIP. Prior to that, she was one of the first senior staff members at the center, joining as senior vice president for domestic policy when Center for American Progress first opened its doors. In between, Tanden was legislative director for Senator Clinton. In 2000, when she was Hillary Clinton's deputy campaign manager and issues director for her Senate campaign in New York. Tanden also served as an associate director for domestic policy in the Clinton White House and senior policy advisor to the First Lady. She was named one of the most influential women in Washington, Indeed, by National Journal and received the India Abroad Publishers Award for Excellence in 2011. Tanden was recently recognized as one of the Fortune magazine's most powerful women in politics. She received her Bachelor of Science from UCLA and her law degree from Yale Law School. So without further ado, I would love to see this policy panel start. I cannot wait. I've been waiting for this for weeks. Thank you.
Helen, we hope we don't disappoint you. We're supposed to be the polished policymakers here speaking. But I want to start off by congratulating Helen and Kendall and this whole team who has put this glorious day together. You can put this on your resumes, but even more importantly, the experience will pay off in spades. And I want to say personally that I'm very proud of all of you. This is just a terrific accomplishment. And it made me think back to my time at Georgetown, back in the Stone Age. And we tried to do something comparable back then. It didn't come close. But the only thing, I think, there were two things that provided common ground. One was we were determined to make a difference on women's leadership. And secondly, our keynote speaker was Eunice Shriver, the mother of Maria, and today Maria kicked this off. So the only thing I can say, comparing those days when there were very few women at Georgetown to today, is we indeed have made progress. So I think that's a good thing for everybody. We have an extraordinary group with us today to discuss this topic. We discovered on the way out that each of us has worked in the White House. You have women on this panel who've worked in Congress, worked on presidential campaigns, either worked in the past or currently work in public policy organizations, think tanks. So the whole area of policy, politics, I think are represented in the kind of work that this group has done. So I want to start by asking you all if your commitment to these issues or your inspiration on these issues, if you were like Helen, for example, did you care about these issues back when you were in college? And if you did, how did that get you to where you are today? And if you didn't, how did you make that transition? Sure.
Okay. I think for me, just in terms of, working and focusing on the work, is deciding early on, I think, as a woman, the kinds of things that are important to you. Things very basic, which are going to sound incredibly corny, but things like ethics and values and hard work, and deciding what kind of issues that you want to get behind and what is important. So yes, for me that started early on. The way that we were raised, you didn't have a choice, really.
So Judy, how did you get on this career trajectory?
I would like to say that I mapped out, so if there are any professors here, please, don't listen to this, but would like to say that I mapped out some 3-year plan or big strategy, but that was not the case. Things really just sort of happen. I've always wanted to be somehow connected to the law. So I went to law school because I really wanted to be a litigator. And I also loved communications. But the path was never a straight one. I mean, I was actually prepared to go work in a law firm called Rogers & Wells in New York at one point in time, and just happened to have lunch with a buddy of mine who worked at the Iran-Contra investigation. For all of you who probably don't remember, that was President Reagan was trading arms for hostages. And all of a sudden, 2 weeks before going to Rogers & Wells, I met the independent prosecutor that was involved in the Iran-Contra investigation, and all of a sudden, life had changed, and I was working there instead of going to New York. So it has been, sort of the unexpected and being prepared for it, I would say.
And I think that's the important 2 words,
Yes.
being prepared.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely.
And what about you?
I would say it started probably earlier than college because I have a younger brother. So it never occurred to me that, I always thought women can do whatever they wanted because I could always beat up on my little brother. And I went to, which was at the time, and I think still is, the largest all-girls Catholic high school in the country. So we were just like girl power all the time. And so it was no surprise that when I decided.
Did you have to wear uniforms?
Yeah.
That is the reason why I don't wear plaid. I swear to God. Elementary, junior high, high school, all plaid. I'm sorry, go ahead.
But it's no surprise that when I decided to move to DC, it was a high school girlfriend of mine who I ran into who got me started with, talking to some friends who lived here. And I think one of the things that I learned throughout my life is that it's the relationships you have with other women that have become so critical, both to your personal success, but also being able to help others. And, you know, we're sort of flooding the zone on having more women in positions of power and influence, and it's a lot of fun, too. So.
Now, you came to Washington after you were practicing law in Chicago, is that right?
Yeah. So like a lot of lawyers, I love practicing. I actually don't think that's true of a lot of lawyers, but I did love to practice. But I had watched a lot of C-SPAN, like a lot, and I would be like downstairs, and my dad was like, "You're really kind of a loser. You really should like get a life." And I was not living at home, but occasionally I would go home for the weekends. And so I was like 4 years out of law school, and I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to move to D.C. and I'm going to be a big shot lawyer. And I took a job answering mail for Senator Durbin because that's all they had, and that is very much the path of many people trying to break into the Hill. So if I have one piece of advice on that front, it's just to be brave. And if you have to just, you know, go somewhere without a job for a little bit and do, you know, try to break into something, it's worth doing because, you know, you don't know what can happen one way or the other, but you certainly aren't going to get anywhere if you don't try. So.
There may be some critical advice I just heard, because I was accused of being the only person that people knew who would watch the hearing in person, then go home and rewatch it on C-SPAN. So maybe this C-SPAN connection created a lot of junkies. Mira.
So I actually really wanted to be a lawyer for a really long time. I read stories when I was a kid and wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. But in my senior year in college, I really got the political bug because there was Bill Clinton running. And he had this awesome wife who was really a strong character herself. And so I got really interested in politics my senior year in college. And I was vice president of UCLA, and I invited Bill Clinton to speak at UCLA in the primary. And Bill and Hillary Clinton came to speak, and it was actually their last event of the primary, and we got 10,000 students at UCLA. And I totally got the bug. And then I had this whole question of whether I should go to law school or not. I'd already taken the LSAT, and I decided to go. I got into Yale Law School and decided to go, but then immediately went into the '92 campaign, and I was a complete minion. Like I did the news clips and did like house party fundraising. But really got the bug. And I would say one thing about campaigns, definitely of that campaign, but of most of the campaigns I've worked on, you know, people focus on the sort of cynical aspects of politics, but in a campaign you really have people who come from all walks of life who are really motivated about changing the direction of their country. And in '92, that was totally the case because we had 12 years of, you know, of a different party. And there was a lot of energy about change, and Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton represented a lot of change. So that's how I got really excited. It was really through the lens of a political campaign. And what was interesting is I worked really, really hard on that campaign, and then the people noticed, and in '96, the person who ran the campaign in '92 in California recommended me to be issues director. My advice to everyone is, one of the pieces of advice I have is to just you have to really work very hard. You know, when you're in these jobs coming out, people notice the people who work the hardest. I would say a little bit. Sometimes women have to work a little harder than the men to be equally recognized. But you can you can advance when you're willing to struggle. And I've been really fortunate. I do need to say I've been really fortunate to have some fantastic mentors in my career, one of whom is sitting next to me. Milan was chief of staff when I worked for then First Lady Hillary Clinton, and Milan was a great mentor to a number of women in the White House who've advanced to do just an array of great things, and it's in part because we had the great example of not only Hillary Clinton, but Milan Verveer, who looked out for a lot of people. So
Well,
thanks,
thank you,
Milan.
Mira.
And she didn't ask me to say that ahead of time. I'm just true.
And we would go at it at times too. But I think
Never.
You hear a consistency here, and certainly in the panels that preceded, in terms of the hard work, possibly a higher standard for women, which I think that saying that Ginger Rogers had to do everything Fred Astaire did, only she had to do it in high heels and backwards, is absolutely true. It's still there, and we still have to work to somehow demonstrate what we can do, but hopefully that is easing. But I think this whole issue of campaigns, if you're interested in this space, sort of getting that kind of experience that I wouldn't recommend it for a lifetime work, but it is the kind of thing that stays with you and really does begin to open doors, as well as your head, in very significant ways. I remember when I was reminded recently, because I had a high school class reunion, and I won't say what one it was, but I was reminded that we were on a junior class trip to Washington, and I just announced to everybody on the bus when we were passing the spires of Georgetown that that's where I was going to school. I didn't know anything about this university, but it was in Washington, and at that time, there was a tremendous euphoria over politics and getting young people involved in politics, and it took hold, and certainly was that beginning space for me that in all the myriad ways, just as you said, Judy, you let me count the ways that this road goes. It's not a straight trajectory. But there are things that begin to affect you that I think have a lot to do with where you wind up ultimately. What about people? Neera just said that mentors made a difference for her. We've heard that a lot. Are there individuals, were there certain kinds of organizations that you were a part of? Because I think networks say everything.
They do. I mean, I will say this about me, is that I got into that very, very late in the game, honestly. I started my business. I've been doing crisis for about 20 years. And really what I have been focused on that is just doing the work and just really hunkering down and getting it done. And I would probably say it's probably within the last 2 that I have tried to spend more time doing this kind of thing. And just getting out and meeting other women and connecting. Which is extremely valuable. I would encourage all of you to start to do it much younger than being 20 years in your career and doing it, but you should, yeah, it's important.
But Judy, you have a crisis management firm. You've had it for some time. Clearly, this is something that you came into. It wasn't something you thought about.
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of crises to manage of all kinds, whether they're companies or they're politicians.
That's true.
But you found a whole profession coming out of experiences that you had in government.
Yeah,
right?
No, that's very true. I remember one of my very first days at the White House, and the president was walking down ready to brief and asked about a particular issue, and I remember giving him some points on it. I remember thinking, oh God, I hope that was true. I just said that.
That's never happened.
Oh my God.
It is the scariest thing.
It is.
And you think
It
they
is.
may just repeat what I said.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. But I will say to all of you that the thing that has been most helpful, we were talking about it in the green room, is the kinds of experience that you can get through your work that are transferable. At the White House, when I had to go out and brief the White House press corps. And as you might imagine, the questions aren't, ooh, let me tell you the president's doing a great job. Just wanted to say that. It's not those, nice, warm, big, fat, wet kiss kind of questions. And what I found was the same skills that I used while I was at the U.S. Attorney's Office in Washington, in court, having conversations with judges and answering questions, were the exact same skills that turned out to be extremely helpful while I was at the White House, being able to stand on your feet and answer those questions. And you would never think that. You would never think that until it happened. So I think, making sure you have a good, strong skill set that you can move around to different arenas has proved to be very helpful, I think. Yeah.
What about mentors or people who just had a critical role they played in your life and how you acted on that?
There's probably just one. I've lucky to have been exposed to a lot of different strong women over the years, but I'd say two things. One is when I was very young, I wanted to carry this like big heavy thing out to the driveway for one of the school moms, and she didn't want me to do it. She wanted one of the boys to do it, and that got me very upset. And I was not very nice about it, and I think I was making a face or something. And so my principal called me down to her office, and the whole way down the hallway, I'm like crying the whole way because I know I'm going to get in trouble. But she explained to me that, you know, there are different women of different generations, and you have to be sensitive to, you know, not everybody views this world the same way you do. And so even if you have disagreements, you have to be respectful. And, you know, it just like burned me inside. But I thought, okay, like at least I have to keep an open mind about not everybody comes from the same experience, and you just have to keep pushing the envelope, but recognize that you know, it takes a while to make, you know, to have change come about. And then I think the other thing I would say about just not so much mentoring, but watching, particularly in the Senate, the women in the Senate play such a critical role in making the place function to the extent it does. And I think even during the government shutdown, you know, we saw how productive it was when the women came together. And you know, we just had a meeting at the White House with several women members of Congress, and one of the senators actually couldn't. She wasn't sure if she could make it because she had to find a babysitter for her son.
Kirsten.
And yeah, and so there are all these things you juggle as a female that, you know, not necessarily isn't necessarily true for other.
On the Hill, do you feel like women lead differently from men?
I think that women are more nimble. They seem to be able to sort of appreciate body language and other clues to negotiate slightly better. But I think the Hill is a very unique place, and just because there's so many young people too. I mean, you're just sort of, the gender stuff is actually sometimes, especially at the staff level, not as pronounced because there really are just so many women leaders in the staff level, I think.
But we had references earlier today to needing to develop the skin of a rhinoceros following Eleanor Roosevelt's keen advice in certain circumstances, and politics is certainly one of those circumstances. And working in the White House and dealing with the West Wing, which is predominantly male, and this has not been special to any political party, this has sort of been there forever. How did you, if you did, cope with the situation as women in significant positions in the White House, and you're there today in a very significant position? And what attributes do you think are necessary being in the minority in those roles? Women are still in the minority, regrettably. What attributes work best in terms of dealing with your male colleagues and trying to get across points that might not necessarily ever even enter their minds, yet could be very critical to the administration and the president?
So can I say something about that, which is, you know, one of the reasons why I think it's so important that we have more women leaders, and actually I'm just thrilled that there are so many people in this room who seem excited about it, and you can demonstrate your excitement because it is like the most beautiful day we've had in Washington, and you're here. So thank you. You know, one of the things that I think is so important is it's in my experience working on policy at the White House or in the Senate or between the White House and the Senate and the House, is that it really, really matters who's around the table. And it has been my experience that it happens to be that women leaders address the issues that women are concerned about when we're talking about policy. Just take the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, that was a long process. The women who focused on preventive care for women happened to be women leaders themselves, like Senator Mikulski, Leader Pelosi, people who focused on ensuring that pre-existing conditions that affected women in the bill those issues were really managed and dealt with by women leaders in the Senate and in the House. And that's why I think it's so vital that as we think about public policy going forward, it does matter. I think, you know, not to tell many tales out of school, but Milan did matter that Milan was at the table, that Hillary was at the table, first Miss Clinton was at the table back then. And it matters now that you have women in the White House at the table. A lot of the issues, we work very closely with the White House on pay equity, gender issues, equal pay. CAP is co-sponsoring the White House Summit on Working Families. The people who are leading that effort are women, Valerie Jarrett, Tina Chen. Now, obviously, the president is committed to it, and the whole White House infrastructure is committed to it. But it's been my experience, it does matter to have people who live these experiences, and it is still the case that women are dealing with caregiving disproportionately, but living these experiences at the table. And that's why I think it is so vital, and CAP is really committed to ensuring that we have more women in public policy. But as we advocate for policies, we really think about who is making the decision and how their experiences are reflected and can be reflected in policy.
Also, just on the policy-making front, it was Susan Collins working with Senator Heller on the Republican side of the aisle to cut a deal on the extension of unemployment insurance. And she was the one on the phone negotiating the final deal to get it through the Senate. So I think it's not insignificant that a lot of times when policy passes through, particularly in the Senate, it's really the result of the women in that body. And I think actually, in terms of how to navigate the inside of the West Wing, the inside strategy you mentioned in the green room is just an interesting point to make, that you kind of just have to do your own thing sometimes.
Well, I was saying earlier, when you all weren't privy to our conversation, that you often have to lobby a lot harder inside than you do outside, because you really have to create a force to then persuade the people who will have the ultimate decision to make. And if one goes directly, often to the chief of staff, to the president, say, it's not clear that the advocacy would ever succeed, but if you can create a united force, then you're in much better shape to do it. So I think it's just a demonstration that you really, when you are in the minority, as women still are in a very number of significant positions, you have to be that much smarter about how you can have impact at the table, because Neera is exactly right. When you take the perspectives and talents and experiences of women, they should be impacting public policy. Public policy is about everybody. It's not just about men. But if you don't have women at the table influencing that process, it's very hard to do. Why don't we bring you all into this conversation so that, because we're running a little late already, and we want to make sure that we take that kind of enthusiasm that Helen has for these issues, and you get to ask your questions. And maybe before anybody comes to the mic, we can talk about the value of internships and volunteer experiences. We talked about campaign experiences, but other kinds of experiences that if you're a student and you're not graduating in May, but you've got a couple years to go, what kinds of ways in which you can get some firsthand experience that will help you with your career in this space?
Yeah, I think internships are great. I will also say that I think first cheap jobs are great too. I remember when I first got out of college, I was looking for a job, and I managed to get a job at a very, very small nonprofit. And I remember thinking, oh God, it's not even enough to, pay a loan back or something. But it was the best job for me ever, ever. Why? Because it was a nonprofit, and so they didn't have a lot of money. So I got to do everything. I got to do everything. I was going with the president everywhere. I got to prepare briefing papers. I organized press conference. I did fundraisers. It was great. So I think any time that you can get experience, whether you're getting paid a little money or no money, you should grab it.
Others?
First of all, everyone should apply for an internship at the Center for American Progress, because it's we do a lot of public policy. I had a few internships in college, which I think were phenomenal, but I would totally agree about the first cheap job. I think in my job on the campaign, I was actually paid a fellowship, which was a way to do, I think,
It's a fancy way of saying nothing.
below the minimum wage. No, they gave you money. It was a scholarship. So we had a scholarship that was, I think, paying me at like $3 an hour at the time. But it was a fantastic experience, which really helped.
Well,
Excellent. Like people are saying,
I
yeah,
will
great.
say that over the course of my experiences, I've had many interns, and when it came to hiring for a full-time position, I would go first to those fabulous interns as the prospective place to go to fill the job. Because by then, you know how good they are, you know what experience they've accumulated, and they would come right in and be able to do a full-time job. So don't underestimate the power of internships. And now we'll turn to you all.
Well, I just want to thank you for coming out and talking to us. My question is, obviously you're sitting here, you've made some good decisions. So I was wondering how you go through that decision-making process, and if there was like one decision that you thought really was influential in your career path. Thank you.
I mean, I think the thing is, it's good to have mentors and friends who can offer good counsel. And one of the really important things that mentors do, people think that mentors are, good for jobs, but they are great for counseling. So I've reached back to mentors who were my professors in law school, former bosses. When I've had to make a big decision, when I left the Obama administration to come back to CAP, I sought a lot of my former bosses and got their guidance. It's really helpful to have that kind of experience and people you can rely on. And the one thing I would say, just briefly, is I have been hugely lucky to have great mentors who are both male and female. Men and women who are really committed. John Podesta was president of CAP, who's a fantastic mentor for me. Really sought the advancement of women in the Clinton administration, but definitely at CAP. CAP has always had a number of women leaders. And so I do think it's important to seek out, people who are going to be helpful to you regardless of gender.
I'm going to ask us to be shorter
Yeah,
on our
sorry.
answers because I'm getting signs here that I don't want to pay any attention to. So the next one.
Hi, thank you ladies for coming out here. I'm kind of with Helen on this. I'm geeking out a bit. I think as somebody who's right now interning for the Senate, I certainly value the opportunity to be able to be involved in these internships, but I am curious how you make that transition from that internship level into that junior staff position.
Okay, we're going to take a couple, and then whoever wants to can answer any of them.
My question is about the Paycheck Fairness Act that just got blocked, and I was wondering if you could speak about that and what you think the issue is, why we can't get something like this passed or bring this to the table even to discuss it.
Okay, and let's take one more on this side.
What has been a professional mistake or failure that you really greatly learned from and had to go to more of a vulnerable place and then push through it?
Okay. Who wants to take which?
I'll go with the personal failure. It's sort of a general tip, I think, for folks. You see it. How many people watch the show? Well, okay, so you'll know what I'm talking about with this. There's something in the show where Olivia talks about trusting her gut. And I think oftentimes when we tend to make mistakes or errors, or we don't think that we have succeeded, that we actually don't listen to ourselves. And most of the time we know, we just don't listen. So, part of the advice that I would give one to you and to others is that as you are thinking about whatever decisions you want to make, so listen to what you think about it, because that's going to be the most important thing.
Anybody on the paycheck fairness or internships?
You want to do internship and I'll do paycheck fairness?
So I think if you have a Hill internship, which is great, especially on the Senate side, because I'm biased towards the Senate. Because the House can't pass anything these days. No, I'm just kidding.
Senate's not looking that great either.
I mean, unfortunately, because it is just so hard, and I think it's just general advice, but talk to as many people as you can, have as many coffees as you can, just apply everywhere, and certainly don't be afraid to start at the lowest rung, which you're not, especially if you're interning now, which I know are not the most glamorous jobs on the Hill. But I do think just being willing to be creative about it might not be the dream job, but it's going to be the right path to the dream job. So there's a couple different ways if you know kind of where you want to be in 5 years, which I realize is sometimes hard to figure out. Kind of what are the skills that you want to develop, kind of what Judy had talked about earlier, which is you want to develop a package of skills that are transferable. So if something doesn't open up on the Hill right away, you're doing something at a think tank or on a campaign and building the relationship so people know you do good work, and then you can slot in at the right time. So good luck.
So on paycheck fairness, I mean, I think the issue around paycheck fairness is really up to the public. I mean, these issues are really popular. Paycheck fairness, I think, polls at like 90%. It's not just whether it's popular, it's whether senators hear from people in their districts about these issues. And so, we'll have an experiment on this in the next couple of months, because it's not only an issue in the Senate, but there's a number of Senate candidates, Allison Grimes, Michelle Nunn, who are also focusing on these issues. And I mean, what really moves issues in the Hill, at least in my experience, is when you go through an election cycle and people think they won or lost because of the issue. So I think that's how we make real progress on these, on paycheck fairness. I also think it's important for folks, especially in this room, to think about the broad array of issues that affect women in the workplace. Paycheck fairness is a huge issue, but I also think one of the reasons why we have a world or a country in which 50% of law school graduates are women and have been women for 20 years, and yet only 15% of equity partners are women, and that has plateaued over the last decade, is because we also have to have a series of policies. There's definitely issues around pay, but we also have to recognize that women are still the caregivers, and so issues like paid leave in the United States, where it's not paid for, where there's no pay for paid leave, women will leave the workforce for a few years and then face a gap in pay or other issues. So as young women leaders, who all of you are in this room, I hope you'll think about the broad array of ways in which we need to ensure that our workplaces are reflective of both the needs of employers and employees, individuals and families, and that when we do so, we'll make progress, and a lot of these issues will move a lot faster.
And let me just go back to the internship question, because I really do think it's invaluable experience, and obviously you want to translate that as best you can into paying work. In an earlier panel, someone asked the question about resumes and what should go into a resume. For some of these jobs, it's like applying to Georgetown. There are literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds. And when you're making the selection, as I think we've all been in the position, you don't really know that everybody looks equally fantastic, or more often than not, that's increasingly the case. So you start to call people, or others may call you and say, do you know so-and-so has applied? I cannot stress enough this networking. It sounds so basic in some ways, and it is, but it is absolutely essential that as wide a swath as you can make, even as college students, in the experiences you accrue, they will be invaluable in terms of influencing others who will then stand up for you in terms of that future job. So I know we have to end, but we're not going to leave until everybody here gives one bit of advice to these extraordinary women students here, some who are about to graduate and some are still here for a couple of years. Okay.
I'd say be brave and have a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. Like, I think the thing is to put yourself out there. Can I tell one very quick story?
Sure.
So I was told we had till 3:05. So you really like,
You know, you're pushing us out of here.
So one of the lessons, one of the things that really kind of put a light on in my head is I was working for Hillary when she was a senator. I was the LD, and she had done this floor speech, and it was on around April Fool's Day, and we were talking about all the crazy things in Washington. It was sort of my idea to do this floor speech, and we were walking back from the Senate floor, and Hillary turned to me and said, "Who did the speech?" And I said, "It was like, who came up with the idea? Who did the speech?" And I said, "You know, it was a fantastic team effort, and we all, you know, this whole group of people did this great job." And she stopped in her tracks and looked at me and said, "Who wrote the speech, Neera?" And I said, and I was like, "Oh God." But I said, "You know, I wrote the speech." And she said to me, "Do you think a male staffer would have said it was the whole Senate, it was the whole team, and never mentioned themselves?" And you know, you need to say it's you when you're doing something. You should share credit too, you know, when people help, but you need to say it's you as well. And I think one of the things I've learned is that you really need to get women who will not often put themselves out there to do it, to take the credit, you know, share the credit too. Don't be obnoxious, because that's annoying. But you can't share credit so much that people don't see what you're doing. And I think we have a lot of social cues that make women not, you know, hesitate to do that. And I hope you'll be a little uncomfortable. That was more than one word.
That's fine.
Two things. I think we talked a little bit about them. One, I think, is hard work. I'm a big fan of that. I think the other is preparation. But I think the third one is not being afraid to travel a path that is not conventional.
And I would say to go with those things that you're most passionate about. If it is politics, if it is public policy, whatever it is, that stays with you. It may not be your first job, it may not be your second job, but somehow it will constantly infuse all of the steps that you take. And ultimately, the greatest reward, in my view, is to be able to make a difference, to have some impact. This is a field in which you can have tremendous impact, but there are many others. But really what will count in the end is how well prepared you are, how hard you've worked, and you're daring to compete, as well as you're really being passionate about what you care about. So with that, I think we are forced to end.